Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the sit down. I am sitting here with Sean Embries, who is an author. He's also a first sergeant. And today we're going to sit down. We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about his book that he wrote, Ghost of the Valley, which the link is in the description. So if you want to check out his book, please click the link in the description here. We're going to be talking about his book. We're going to be talking about PTSD, anxiety, something that a lot of people go through. And I think it's a topic that we ultimately need to bring awareness to a lot more. And so I'm sitting here with Sean, and we're going to go over basically his time in the military, his book, his story, and bring that awareness out to people so that people can better understand, come into this community, talk about it, and ultimately be there for each other. So I'm here with Sean. So Sean, how long? I know you have a pretty extensive military background, pretty extensive military career. About how long have you been in the military so far?
I just hit my 15-year mark, February of this year.
Perfect. What made you, when you joined the military? What was the reason that you ended up joining?
I actually joined for my high school sweetheart, who once I signed the contract and left MEPS and everything, she broke up with me, so I was kind of stuck. So it was an irresponsible decision, but it wasn't just for her. I mean, I always had a sense of service. My grandfather served in Korea, so I played army in the backyard with my cousins growing up and stuff. So it's something I've always wanted to do. I guess
Yeah.
just um, the initial judgment of joining was probably for the most immature reason, but it's put me where I'm at now, so I can't complain.
Yeah. I think not always for the best reasons, but the outcome. I always tell people, I'm like, no matter what my outcome was, I wouldn't change anything, especially because at the end of the day, it's put you here today, um, which I think is funny. And I think a lot of people when they join, they have similar circumstances of that one.
Yeah.
Um, so I know you're an author. When you wrote Ghost of the Valley, which is, again, it's going to be on this link here. Tell me a little bit about why you wrote it. What's the timeline? Just tell me a little bit about the book and basically like your story with it in general.
So, after both my deployments, I had some people tell me a couple times, hey, you should, what happened to you over there? You should probably write a book. Like it's abnormal, especially for an MP. And I think people can learn from it. Da, da, da. And I kind of took it as a compliment, but it's not something I ever wanted because I didn't want to put all my information out there. I feel very vulnerable, put my emotions and stuff like that. So I never really did it. When I got back from my deployments, I was always serving in leadership roles: squad leader, SRT, NCO, platoon sergeant. I never worked staff or anything like that. So, for many years after the deployments, I was essentially, still kicking indoors with the guys and going to NTC and doing all that stuff. So I never really had time to, I guess, reflect on the deployment. I never had time to myself, and I was still getting late night phone calls at 2 a.m., drunken soldiers, dealing with all that stuff. And then when I came here to Fort Leonard Wood in 2019, I came here to be an instructor for SLC. And I mean, it was amazing. It was nice. It was the first time I actually got time to myself. My phone was on vibrate for 2 years. So it was very nice to have that time to just kind of reflect and decompress. But it wasn't something I was ready for, and I found out very quickly that PTSD evolves to the situation in which you're in. And with all that time on my hands, I was going through doors I wasn't ready to go through, or I hadn't been through in a very long time, because I was getting off early. I was chilling at home, and then I just would sit here and go, okay, well, I don't have any soldiers. Like, I have no one to talk to, and then next thing you know, I was just thinking about things I hadn't thought about, and I tried all forms of therapy and counseling, and those were all kind of band-aids for a tourniquet that I essentially needed.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So I decided to try something new, which was to just put my pain on paper. And I knew I was going to get old at some point, and I didn't want to forget. So it was more or less like a chronological order. It wasn't. I didn't write it like a book. I just opened up a Microsoft Word document, kind of went to town. And then a friend of mine picked it up and was like, "Yo, this is like really good. Like this should be a book." And I was like, "Nah, I don't really know." And then it somehow got in the hands of I don't know if you know, but in Clothing and Sales they have like this big blue book where all that the bookshelf is at. It's called The Mentor.
Oh yeah,
It's all
yeah,
study
yeah,
guides.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that guy is a retired sergeant major. He picked up the book and he was just like, "Look, man, I'm gonna be real with you. Like, normally we don't pick up memoirs and biographies and shit like that because you're just let's be real, you're not Brad Pitt. Like, you ain't gonna fucking sell a bunch of books. No one cares about some brown dude from L.A." And I couldn't disagree with him. I was like, "Yeah, I mean, you're right. I get it." He was like, "But I read the entire thing and I felt very compelled." And he was like, "I'd like to put like $10,000 down and I want to." Put that money towards shipping, distribution, printing. I want to take it all and do this for you. And then on top of that, then I was extremely lucky because I had someone from the military editor, very nice lady. She edits a lot of military publishing books, and she, charged. I don't want to say her prices or anything, but she charged something I could not afford. And I was just like, look, this is just something that like I'm doing because I don't really know why I'm doing it, but it's just kind of happening. And I don't really have that money. And so I said, I appreciate your time. And she was like, all right, I'll work it around paid customers. And she edited my entire book for me for free. She was amazing. And then, and the next thing you know, put it on Amazon, Nook, Kindle. The publisher hired a guy with like a sexy radio voice. He did the entire Audible book. And then when you read my book, there's a bunch of italicized things. Like, so as you're reading, either I engage in conversation with someone during, whatever the battle or whatever's going on, or I'm having my own internal thoughts. Well, I went to a recording studio here in Missouri and I recorded all those lines. I sent it to him, and then now our audiobook is like dual narrated. So like it's being read in the story, and then next thing you know, my voice would interject and I'm actually talking to people and stuff. So it was something new. It was really cool. But yeah, that's kind of how the book started. The publisher, he ate, like I said, about 10 G's just to get the book started. And I said, look, man, I'm not really here to make money. And I said, I don't want any money, but how about, because there obviously is a business side to it. I said, whatever funds that I do make, we're just going to send over to my lieutenant's foundation. It was established for my lieutenant who was killed, the Tyler Parton Foundation. So I make $1 every book sale. That's it. And I get that from the publisher, and then I send that to the foundation that was established for my LT who was killed, because I just didn't think it was fair that I make a profit off of someone's death. Yes, they're my experiences, but I shouldn't put money in my pocket over. I wasn't the only one on that mountain. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't the only one of these battles, so it wouldn't be very fair of me. So, but that was essentially why the book came to what it did.
I think that's awesome. And you mentioned that going through this process, that when you were stationed in Fort Leonard Wood, you had a lot more time to start thinking. You had a lot more time to yourself. And that's where things started to kind of like creep up because you weren't as busy.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a lot of people who struggle with PTSD and anxiety. Often you see them as like almost workaholics. Like you see them as constantly in something, constantly doing something, because as soon as you do have time to yourself, as soon as you do start sitting on the couch or whatever, you ultimately start to think, you start to get in your head, you start to like re-experience things over and over again.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can relate with that as far as like always staying busy. And that's another piece with that is like with regards to actually production of the book and actually donating all of your proceeds to your lieutenant's foundation. I think that's actually awesome. Like if you want to send me all the information on that, I would be 100% willing to support in any type of way on that. So definitely send me any information you can, and I'll throw that in the link as well, just so we can kind of like bridge both here. So as you said, you've struggled with PTSD, and that was when you got to Fort Leonard Wood. Um, what exactly were you experiencing, and in what way? Like when you finally sat there and you got time to actually think, what exactly was going on in your head, and what exactly, like, how did you feel, and how do you still feel with regards to everything?
Just loneliness or anxiety or thinking about, so, some of those memories. Kind of, I don't want to say flashbacks, but just thinking about a lot of it, watching videos and looking at pictures from deployment, and because I live out in the country here. My next door neighbor is like 300 meters away, so it's very quiet, which is nice. But it's just not as busy. Me being a kid from LA, like I'm used to busy city life and stuff. So it's very quiet. A lot of time to just sit to myself and think and hear nothing. And so, like I said, it just kind of led me to anxiety and loneliness that made me want to connect again with the guys and stuff. So that was what I
Yeah.
was feeling most time. And then, that went on for about a year, and then the book came out, and then through 2020, um, I was dealing with just, I guess, the overwhelming support from the book. So I didn't have as many of those feelings, and I was helping veterans. I was doing a bunch of different things on social media to like kind of get it out there. So I was kept busy then, and then after that, 2021, I picked up a new job as the first sergeant for a basic training company. So I'm back working. I mean, I'm working drill sergeant hours, so about
Yeah.
6 7 days a week from 2
Yeah,
a.m.
it's
to
a
10
lot.
p.m. depending on what type of phase we're in. So, um, but
Yeah,
yeah, so I stay busy now.
those hours are brutal. I feel
Yeah,
like
it
for
sucks.
for
Yeah.
yeah, those are not good. So during this process, kind of like when you wrote everything down, did you start to feel a little bit better actually putting it down?
Yeah.
And when you were writing it, did it kind of like almost like re-traumatize you in a sense, writing everything down, or did it start to feel better?
No, I felt better because luckily, when I got back from my deployment, it's not like I didn't talk about it. So I'm a big believer. Just because my NCOs did it to me when I was a private and they had just got back from Iraq, and I had no experiences, they were always talking to me about what happened and what they did and stuff like that. So when I got back from my deployments, I immediately started talking about my experiences, using them during training, teaching, stuff like that. So I'm a huge believer that anything that's done in repetition will help defeat whatever anxiety and PTSD or whatever. Well, not defeat, like make it go away completely, but make it manageable.
Yeah.
Because I've talked about it so much that it just doesn't bother me anymore. I have my days and stuff like that, but it wasn't triggering me or anything like that. Making it difficult. I actually felt nice getting it off my chest. It was a form of therapy.
At what point did you start actually coming to terms? And if somebody was in a similar, like, let's say you could give advice to basically you, I don't know, 10 years ago, I guess, when you got to, what advice would you give yourself or somebody else who's like struggling with this type of PTSD or anxiety? Like, what advice would you give them?
Just don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help or talk to people. It doesn't have to be your loved one, your spouse, family, friend. I mean, counselor. What I mean, try it all. I literally tried it all, and that way I could at least say that I did everything I could. Had something failed, I wanted to make sure I talked to every group or type of person, and so I would recommend just again talking about it and talking about it in repetition. Once you do find that source that you feel comfortable venting to, and then when you do that, then it's easier to talk about with others that aren't part of your necessarily your venting circle. But that's what I would recommend. That's what I'd tell myself to do all over again.
When do you so I know for a lot of people, I think oftentimes you're on basically a road, and do you ever feel like when you're stressed or you have a lot going on, or maybe do you ever feel like you ever fall off the track? And then when you do fall off the track, do you ever feel like what would be your next step to get back on? Or
Do you mean like mental health wise, like falling off the track.
mental mental health wise, like, do you ever feel like you're going through and everything's all happy dory, and then do you ever feel like you get a little stressed, something happens, and like everything's coming at you in every which way? Do you ever feel like you ever fall off, and if you do fall off, how would you get back on the track?
Yeah, but if I do, it's not because of necessarily me thinking about deployment or that specific trauma. I think a lot of that trauma from back then has led to my current anxiety state, and the way I catastrophize now. So like I'll have a good day or whatever, and then like one bad thing happens, another bad thing happens, and then it kind of like compounds on it to itself, and I start to have high anxiety and freak out, thinking that the world's going to end, exaggerating, um,
Yeah,
but it has nothing to do with the events themselves. It's just that those events themselves have led me to sometimes having poor mental health or manageable anxiety and, those kind of things. And to get back on, like I said, just I have a really good support system with my wife and stuff like that. So in my family.
that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think it's so important that, like what you said, is that, you know, to reach out for help if you need the help. I think a lot of times, too many times, especially for leaders, like you've been a leader for quite some time, leading soldiers, training the new generation of soldiers. And I think too often you get in that position where you're not able to take time necessarily for yourself. And that's because you're always, the basic principle of leadership sometimes in the Army is, leaders eat last type of mentality, is that, you almost never, it's always about the soldiers. That sometimes, and I think a lot of NCOs and a lot of soldiers can kind of lose track of being able to sit down and actually reflect to themselves and be able to sit down and go, is like, what do I need? Because often, like, all of your energy is focused on creating and helping your soldiers every step of the way. But I feel like sometimes it's just forgotten. It's like, what do I need today to make me better?
Yeah.
And a lot of times and I used to see that in the Army all the time, is like the leaders often was like forgotten about. Not when you knew like there were steps that sometimes had to be taken. Because at the end of the day, it's like that was kind of like the substandard of leadership, is like you're not going to medical. You're not going to go to medical because that's, you can't miss training.
Yeah.
Like, even if you needed it.
Yeah. No, I agree. The Army is amazing at taking care of soldiers, but the Army sucks at taking care of its leaders.
Yeah.
I've always said that.
Yep. And that's the thing, is like, because the leaders are so, and this is I truly believe this, the leaders are so good. They are so selfless. They push every step of the way, that, and at the same time is like, you don't want to be perceived as weak. And if you do, like, let's say one thing that the Army does that is like, if you do, like, let's say you're having some mental health issues, like you start going through stuff, sometimes you just want to talk, they start flagging you very quickly. And you don't want that on your record. Most people don't. I remember I know I didn't. I know a lot of people who, as soon as you start talking, they start taking weapons from you. They start pulling you off training. They start, putting you on these like watch profile. I'm like, whoa, and that's often the procedure. And people avoid it because, especially leaders avoid it because they don't want all of that to take place, and you get flagged.
Yeah.
They even send, oftentimes they'll send that flag to the armory. You can't draw a weapon,
Yep.
uh, and no leader, most leaders often, and it's more for like soldiers will seek help, but a lot of times your leaders will just kind of get completely passed over.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
what
it's
I've
sad,
seen.
man.
It's crazy. If you could go back, like right now, I know you're a first sergeant and you're kind of like teaching the new generation. What is something that you kind of tell them as far as, mental health and experiences. I know we were talking about this a little bit before, but what's something that like you would tell your soldiers? Because obviously they're the up and coming generation. But what's something that you kind of tell them as far as going through these types of experiences, and what would you tell them?
Just to reach out and get help, and physically and mentally, they need to take care of themselves. Something I didn't do when I was younger. I don't think a lot of us did, because we didn't want to get deemed weak on profile, and we just fought the system, and just this kind of the culture, I guess. If you try not to be a shitbag, if you're trying to be somewhat high speed, you try to build that mentality where you're like, I don't need to go to the sick call, I don't need to do this, like I'm gonna just fight through it. I'm gonna do PT, I'm gonna do this ruck, whatever the case may be. And it's all fine and dandy at some point, but when you really start to injure yourself physically or mentally, you got to take a mental break. You might have stuff going on at home that's crossing over into work, whatever the case may be. You got to learn. You have to learn how to take a knee and take care of yourself, because you're gonna regret it when you're old, my age, getting ready to get out. Like, you can't make those mistakes. You're not inevitable, or excuse me, you're not invincible. Because we all thought we were when we were at that age. But I just try to teach them to please take care of themselves as much as possible, mentally and physically. Because we don't do a very good job of taking care of the young kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're on how many surgeries?
30
right now.
I'll be 32 in the next 2 months.
32.
Yeah.
Jesus, can't even imagine. That's crazy. Well, this is everything with regards to going through the process and seeking help. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of times, especially for, veterans, active duty, people who are still in, is don't be afraid to seek help. And if you want to go and get the book, Ghost of the Valley, I highly recommend it. It's going to be in the link below. So if you have any questions, please comment, like, share the video, because we do want to get the word out on this one. I think mental health is something that all people need to have a community to reach out. Reach out to someone like Sean, who can actually tell you his experiences, his step-by-step process to actually go through the process, and just reach out to somebody like him, somebody like me. Reach out to your fellow veterans, your fellow military service members. And even if you're not a veteran, you're not a service member, and you struggle with, PTSD, you struggle with anxiety, you struggle with handling situations, reach out, because at the end of the day, you're going to feel powerless by yourself. When you are alone, that is when it's going to hit you the hardest. So if you have any questions, please comment below. Everything is going to be in the bio, so take a look at that. And as always, stay free.